Hey, this is Blake Chastain, and you're listening to Let's Talk About Text. It's a show where Scott Okamoto and I talk with our guests about what we're reading. That's the whole deal. You're up to speed. Here's the show. Hey everybody, this is Let's Talk About Texts. It's a show where we talk about what we're reading. I'm Blake Chastain, and I'm joined by my co-host, Scott Okamoto. Scott, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, because for the next however many minutes, we are not thinking about the apocalypse and the crumbling society around us.
Yeah, it's always good to take a break from the apocalypse.
Unless you're reading a book about that. But
That's right. We've also got two great guests with us today, the hosts of the Thereafter podcast, Meghan Crozier and Cortland Coffey.
Woo-hoo.
Welcome to the show.
Hey,
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
We're stoked to be
two
here.
of my favorite people in the whole wide world.
Oh, you're one of my favorites, Scott. I love it.
Same. I was so excited. I was literally like giddy dancing around my kitchen before I got into record and was talking about how excited I was to hang out with y'all. So,
Well, yeah, this is, I mean, all of us have at different points been in the deconstruction sort of podcast type world, which can often be a bit heavy, a bit dramatic, whatever. But this is a show where we just sort of celebrate what we're reading. It doesn't have to be new. It doesn't have to be recent. And it doesn't have to be lighthearted. If you're reading something serious that you want to talk about, go for it. But let's dive in. Is anybody just really excited to share what they're reading right now?
Well, I would nominate Cortland because he has chronicled his rediscovery of reading in the last several months.
Yes.
And is so excited about the things that he's reading and discovering. So, why doesn't Cortland go?
Yeah.
I like discovering for the first time. To be honest, like fiction wise, I'm reading a bunch of fiction, and I'm just so stoked to be. Like, my background, I've talked about this on Thereafter, and that's why Scott knows this, but I grew up, my brother was a big reader, and like I was always like, he was reading through the Redwall series and the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, and we went and saw Jake's at a local library when I was a kid, and my brother was like literally just like consuming books constantly and talking about them and telling me about all the characters, and it always sounded incredible, and I just never could get into it. I would just I had such a hard time, and I didn't think that I could. I didn't think that it was for me. And there was like a few times where I would get a book that I just got really into for some reason, and it was usually nonfiction and either a memoir or a single narrative point of view. And that for some reason was much easier for me because I had a hard time, I think, just keeping track in my head. My imagination doesn't visualize things quite like other people's. And so when there was lots of characters and dialogue and descriptive text about the scenery and things, I just was I can't visualize this and I can't keep track. And so I had just basically said, I'm never going to read fiction. I'm just never going to get into it. And then last year, my wife got super into the romantasy boom of 2023 or whatever. I don't know. I feel like just in the last couple of years, everyone that I know, a lot of the women in my life have been reading through 900-page fairy smut books.
The Court of Thorns and Roses is the big one.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the big one?
Yeah, Sarah J. Maas.
Maybe the
and
Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, Onyx Storm. Yeah.
All those. So she started just pouring through these 900-page books or whatever, and I was like, oh man, again, this same sense of envy of I wish I could do that. That looks so enthralling, and so then I bought her a Kindle, and she started using that, and I was like, maybe I could do that. And so I just on a whim bought an e-reader because I was like, if I make it nerdy and if I make it like tech, then like maybe like and it'll be easy. And so I bought a Kobo. Shout out to Kobo. I love my Kobo. It hooks right to the library. I can get books directly from my library right on the device. And I just made a rule. It was like, I'm gonna try to read something, and then like if I like it, I'm going to keep reading it. And if I don't, like if I can't get into it, I'm not going to have this weird completionist, like I'm going to force myself through it, because I'm just like, I'll start 10 books and I don't care. I'm going to find something that I like and just read once I like something. And so that's been my rule. I've just been like only reading things that like I get into and that I like. And I realized that like having only a few words on the page at a time, it like helps my brain incredibly well. Like I picked up a paper book because my ebook loan at the library expired, and so I found it in paperback because I wanted to finish it, and it was like so much harder for me to have like that second page. This is, I guess, just like me just like talking about how my brain, like when I can see another page that I'm not supposed to be focused on while I'm focusing on that page, like my brain just like I like the last 50 pages of that book that I read in paperback, it was like such a struggle before I could go back to the ebook. And so I realized like, oh man, this is just a big thing about how my brain works. And also just like hyper focus. So I've been reading through a ton of stuff, which I could get into, but I've already been talking a bunch, so I'll pass it back.
Yeah, but have you ever done audiobooks? Like have someone read to you?
So audiobooks, like kind of the same thing with like it's hard for me to keep track of what's happening. I've been recently listening to the Dungeon Crawler Carl audiobook dramatized audio series, which is done through Sound Booth Theater. Huge shout out, huge plug for that book and for that audio podcast presentation of it, because it's like all full cast narration, so voices and sound effects and music, and that helps that like audio drama. I can kind of like get immersed in it and keep track of what's going on. But when it's like one voice switching between dialogue and describing things, again, I don't visualize what's happening, and so it makes it really, I listen to 10 minutes, I'm like, I don't know what happened. He's describing something, but I can't keep track of what it is or who's actually talking. That's the hardest part for me, both reading and listening.
All right. Well, what book have you do you want to talk about today?
I feel like I've talked about it so much, but it's like literally my favorite.
Go for
my
it.
favorite that I've read this year is Becky Chambers. I'm like obsessed with everything that she writes. Oh, Blake,
Wait.
You're on mute. You're still on mute.
I was lagging for a little bit, and I had put myself on mute. Anyways, I'm sorry. Which Becky Chambers book? Because I love Becky Chambers.
So I read To Be Taught If Fortunate first, because I was like asking people for recommendations on like novellas, like short reads, because I was like, I just want to get my feet wet.
Yeah.
And so I read that and I loved it. And then I read Long Way. Is it Long Way to a Small Angry Planet? Is that what it is?
I think so. It's the first one of that series.
And then I poured through that series. I read all 4 of those in the Wayfarer series. And then I've read the first Monk and Robot book. And I have the second one on hold at the library. It's on like a 16-week hold or something, so it'll be a minute till I get it.
Oh man. Yeah, my I love the Monk and Robot books. I think that like the second one, I think like you'll have to like text me when you read it, because there's some really, really cool ideas. Like she fleshes out like the sort of gods of the planet a little bit more, but in this really sort of lovely way that is only sort of alluded to in the first book. But the first book in and of itself is wonderful. It's like I sort of wish that there was more, but I'm also like, it's also just a wonderful 2 really short life affirming books. They're so good. I love them.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. They're coming out with a bound together version, both books in one paperback, and I will be buying it just to have on my shelf and to give to people. It's the way that she writes, the way that she uses sci-fi to talk about things that matter, but not in a heavy way, but not in a fluffy way either. It's like deep, but I don't know. I could go on and on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's sorry. I nerded out on that too, because I really do love Becky Chambers and think that I think the genre that I've heard sometimes, at least the Monk and Robot books described as is solar punk, which is sort of, instead of steampunk, not a dystopia, but like a more positive sci-fi world. And I mean, that sort of stuff is really good because it helps you imagine what might, imagine new possibilities, which we need more than ever. So.
Okay, I could talk more about that if you wanted, but I want other people to talk. Scott, Megan.
Yeah, I can jump in, or I don't know, Scott, if there was a different direction you wanted to go.
No, jump in.
Yeah, so I will just have to say I'm always reading like 8 or 10 books at the same time. Like I'm the type of person that usually I have kind of like a heavier nonfiction book or something I'm learning from. Like I'm reading School Moms, which is like about all the legislation that's impacting education right now. And I read like fiction, and sometimes I'll have like a book of poetry going. I just have and the other thing I've realized is if I hit a lull in my reading, it's probably because I'm stuck in a book that I refuse. Like I can't just not finish a book. And so I'm like, well, I can just start a new one in the meantime. And then if it takes me a lot longer to finish this other one. But I really have to give a big shout out to one of my favorite authors. Just came out with a collection of short stories, and I love short stories because you can pick it up and put it down as many, like you can just read through one and then come back and you don't have to remember any of the characters. Her name is Curtis Sittenfield. You may have heard of her. She's got another collection of short stories that got picked for Reese's Book Club, but the reason I love her so much is because she's about my age. She grew up in the Midwest, and I feel like she writes the way, like her first book was kind of about it was prep. It was about a college prep or a high school kind of prep school, and it was kind of, I was around the same age as the characters, or as she was when she was writing those characters. And then like each kind of book that she's come out with has been kind of my life stage, and the way it just describes a lot of kind of my identity, and I resonate with it a lot. But this particular one is called Show Don't Tell, and there were a lot of stories about like evolving relationships and divorce, and I was like, how does she do this? Like because I just am divorced, and so but there was a story in there about the Billy Graham rule, which I thought was like, this is not a Christian author or like she just is dipping her toes in like, I think what she's seeing in the media. There was another story about an interaction that a journalist has with a very wealthy mega pastor in the South. And it was very interesting to see kind of the intersection with culture and kind of the way that I think more mainstream folks are looking at like the evangelical impact in our society and that interaction and that engagement. And so that collection, it was just really interesting to read because, like I said, you can pick it up and read one story in one sitting. And it's just kind of refreshing to read just for fun, but also have these kind of interesting ways to look at the world and to see how other people are looking at the world. Because we're so steeped sometimes in our own, like, whether it's deconstruction or kind of coming out of evangelicalism, that it's like, hey, let's have this broader perspective here. I have other stuff I'm reading, but I'll pass it on because I am curious what else is what else, what other direction you want to go.
Sure.
We go in any direction y'all want. So.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about Dune then, too.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, everything but Dune. But yeah, no. Okay.
Dune is, yeah. That's
the bridge
Scott's
too
red,
far.
That's his red line.
Yeah.
He will
His
not.
line
awesome.
in the sand, if you will, to make a Dune reference.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of nerd dudes just fell in love with Meghan. Be still, my
absolutely.
heart.
Are you guys Dune fans? Are both of you like big Dune guys?
I'm not a fan. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Justin got me into Dune. Justin sold me on Dune a couple of like a year and a half ago, probably now. He was in Chicago. I went in to see him and have dinner and a drink, and he made the most sort of compelling sell of Dune and like what it's sort of about, and the and like the sort of critiques in it. And it was like, okay, I'm in. I'm going to give this a shot, because I did like the first movie. I saw the first movie without having read it. But then by the time the second movie came out, I had read Dune and Dune Messiah, and then I read the next two, but I haven't read Heretics of Dune or Chapter House Dune yet.
When you say first movie, you mean like of the reboot? Because
the
first
so Dune part
was kind of seen as kind of a disappointment.
Not the David Lynch Dune. Yeah. Not that one.
It has Captain Picard and Sting.
Yes,
that's right.
I here's the thing, and this is a nice teaser for when we have Blake on our episode of Identity Crisis where we talk about Dune. But once I get like into something, I like want to watch the original. I watched Dune Prophecy, the show. I also was watching recently the documentary about the Dune movie that never got made. The
Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yes, exactly. And it's like I don't know. I'm very fascinated by all the Dune lore, but we can dig into that in that episode as well.
Yeah. Tease it for Identity
It'll be
Crisis.
like a crossover.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one, and it'll make me. I think it's already inspiring me, even though we haven't nailed down scheduling. I need to get back into the remaining novels. So I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
Sort of like you, very much like you, Megan. I dabble in all sorts of books. I will start books, and if the mood doesn't strike me, then I'll read something else. And that also does extend into audiobooks. And one sort of phase that I was in at the beginning of the year was I watched Shogun. Which I absolutely loved. I don't know if anybody else watched that.
No, I've heard really good things.
I haven't finished it, but I started it. It's really good.
Yeah,
so much better than the old one. Again, this is sort of the theme of the show today.
Yeah, I mean, like I didn't even know about the original one from the 70s or 80s until after I had finished the new one. But and it's like a 1,000-page novel as well. But I haven't.
The novel's not great. It's you can skip the novel. I'm an English professor saying don't read the book.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's a white guy who wrote this.
We need that permission around here to not.
It's like Eat, Pray, Love in Samurais.
Yeah. Then I did. After that, I got into it's like a few years old now, but there's a PlayStation game, Ghost of Tsushima. So I played that, and then I was like, okay, what about Japanese authors?
I have friends that were models and actors and background actors in that video game.
Oh, seriously? Oh, that's amazing. It is. I know this is not a video game show, but it is one of the most gorgeously rendered video games I've ever played. And like, it's. Like, yes, you can go around and murder people with a katana, but you can also just like ride through beautiful fields. It's like on a horse.
Yeah, I've heard.
I don't know. Yeah. It's just a crazy, amazing game.
It's a beautiful game.
But
agreed.
And then this sort of infatuation with a lot of Japanese culture. It's like, okay, there's a lot of gaps in my reading that I'd like to address, and so I picked up an older book by Haruki Murakami, which is Norwegian Wood is the name of it. So it's an allusion to the Beatles album. Beatles song.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting. It's a very interesting book because like the main character is this guy who's like I think essentially like a freshman in college, but he's not that, in my mind, he's not that compelling of a person, but he listens. And so like these women in his life just open up to him because he listens to them. And like they share their sexual fantasies and their insecurities and all these things. And I mean, the book was written a few decades ago, so it's not up with like current mores or anything like that. Some of the things that are sort of shocking.
Just looked it up.
Some of the things are sort of shocking that are in that are part of the narrative. But it's just very it is very well written and really compelling. Just the way these essentially they're just series of conversations and hookups that this guy has.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I've really enjoyed it, and it's been interesting to listen to as an audiobook. But I'm glad I chose the audiobook as well. So
I just have to say he has a book about running that I've read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's one of his pretty famous books like that. He is a novelist, but he wrote that book.
It's like what I talk about when I talk about running, or what I think about when I talk about running, or something like this. I listened to that while running, so I do sometimes listen to audiobooks while I'm running, but it does make me run slower because I'm like I pick up the pace if I'm listening to music, and if I'm just like going for a long slow run, I'll listen to an audiobook and just kind of forget I'm running and just kind of lean into I'm just enjoying a book.
Yeah. So that's right. That you nailed the title. It's what I talk about when I talk about running.
Yeah.
And then like this, the other book that I think he was known for more recently was 1Q84, which I think might have been like a sci-fi book, but it was definitely very popular when it was initially released, and it's probably stayed popular. I sort of was led to this book in particular by like I read an article in like a Stereophile or one of those types of magazines that's on Apple News that was about kisa cafes, which are these cafes and bars throughout Japan where they just play vinyl all day, and it's a place where you go and listen to recorded music. And they just have like hi-fi stuff, and the author of this article was visiting a number of them, and then mentioned that Norwegian would sort of it's written around the time that it takes place around the time that those cafes really started to become more common in like the 60s and 50s and 60s and 70s. So. And that's like the vibe we want to have in our house. Like we did get a record player.
I'm in.
Yeah. So anyways, that's what I'm reading.
You hipsters with your vinyl.
An insufferable white guy in his 40s got into vinyl.
Hey,
what a surprise.
We're all old enough to remember we actually lived through vinyl. Like we bought records. I did. So yeah, no, it's so cool. It's very cool. Listening to all you talk, so Blake and I just started this, and I'm realizing that as much as we talk about the books that we're reading and the enjoyment we get out of them or the information we get out of them, this podcast is probably just as much about the role that reading plays in our lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both externally as an escape from the horrible things happening in the world, but also as like a development of our interior life as we expand our imagination and our understanding of, the world. We compare and contrast our realities with that of the things that we're reading about, and that's so cool.
That's a great
applaud all
point.
of you. So for making me think that.
Yeah.
But Scott, you haven't told us what you're reading.
Oh, yeah. I don't read. I don't like books.
He did it for work for long enough, and now it's like...
Yeah, I'm done.
He got to the end.
English papers.
Yeah, reading English papers kind of ruined reading for me. So,
it's like you can recognize words, but you won't put them together if you don't have to.
No. So I'm going to talk about one of my dearest friends. Her name's Sarah Kuhn. She's half German, half Japanese. She's an amazing writer. And she wrote a series of books called the Heroine Complex series. So, like so it's a play on words, Heroine Complex. And she wrote a book in 2016, and that's what I'm going to talk about today because I started rereading it. It really put her on the map, and it got her. She writes for the Star Wars universe and the Marvel universe now, and she's killing it. But the first book was really groundbreaking in 2016, called Heroine Complex. It's about these superheroes. It's young adult, but it's kind of like older young adult because there's like sex in it and there's mild violence. It's told from the point of view of a woman named I wrote it down, Evie Tanaka, and she's a Hapa Japanese white girl from the Bay Area. And she's the assistant to San Francisco's superhero. So she created this universe where like a fissure opens up in the earth and it connects to another dimension, and these entities, these like demonic monster things, come out of this fissure and create all this havoc. And Avita Jupiter is the superhero who fights these things and kicks their asses and sends them back. And it's a great setup because the story is told from her assistant, Evie, who's this sort of nerdy and supportive, helpful friend. And they're best friends since childhood. And there's a lot of backstory of them, like dealing with racism in the Bay Area and and the anti-Asian shit they had to put up with growing up, and they're bonded for life. They're best friends. They're like soulmates. And so the first book, it was listed as like one of the first young adult books that addressed race so head on, and yet it was so fun to read. This thing won awards. It sold tons of things. Like I said, it put Sarah on the map. I'm looking. There's 6. Oh no, 1, 2, 3. On Goodreads, there's 4,000 ratings. That's just the people who rated it. So this book really killed it. So much so that my son was in middle school when this book came out, and then high school as the sequels came out. His friends were reading it, and when they found out that Ethan's dad was friends with Sarah Kuhn, they were like all geeking out. And so we had a little party. Ethan's friends, they called themselves the Nerd Herd. And they had a little party at my house, and Sarah came, and they were all like, wow, Sarah's here. And so she signed their books and hung out with them and talked to them. And then in the next book, she gave them a shout out, shout out to the Nerd Herd in the acknowledgments at the back.
That's awesome.
So it was so cool. But there's romance, there's fantasy, and there's race issues and best friend issues and all these things that Sarah kind of weaves together. And because I don't want to give any spoilers, but this book kind of like the assistant, Evie, kind of comes into her own and becomes kind of a superhero superhero and so that's her. It's like her own hero's journey. She thought she was just this assistant helping out, the superhero. And there's all these funny pop culture references about the internet, and there's Instagram influencers trying to get a story and get pictures, and there's this journalist that's kind of messing things up, and it's and if you know San Francisco at all, it's like a love letter to the city of San Francisco. There's so many locations that people will recognize and know, and so. I read this just smiling back in 2016, and then she's had I think there's 6 books in this series, And I haven't read the last one because I knew it was the last one. It was the kind of thing where I don't want to end. I don't want to say goodbye to this universe and these characters. And and there's queer issues in subsequent books. There's a younger sister that kind of comes into her own. And so it kind of spun off into this whole universe. And it's so much fun. I recommend it to all my friends who have kids who are like middle school and above, because like I said, there's some sexy things in it, and that can be off-putting for some people, but yeah.
That's awesome. But it also reminds me of a book that I recently read called Last Night at the Telegraph Club. I think her name was Melinda. I'm gonna have to look it up. But it also was, it took place in San Francisco. It was about Chinese immigrants, but in Chinatown, and it was young adult, and it was about a queer woman that was kind of discovering her queer identity and like going to a nightclub, and it was talking about like drag culture, and I learned a lot about, like, I'm not from San Francisco and I haven't spent a ton of time there, but it made me want to like go like hang out there, it was, so I love those books that like the city is kind of a character in the book too.
Totally.
Yeah. It's similarly, I was thinking as you were talking about this, the Heroine complex is on my stack too, by the way. It's been on my radar, and that's cool to know that it is.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know, it could be connected to some of the other things that I read. I'm always like kind of curious how I stumble upon things, but I read, one of the books that I've read this year was Light from Uncommon Stars by, I believe it's Rika Aoki. I hope that I'm pronouncing it correct.
Yeah.
But it's set in San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah, that's where I live.
And it is like the lead is like a trans character, Asian trans character, and then like Asian American culture in that area is like a character in the book, is like a big part of the story. And it made me think of Scott a lot when I was reading it. And, it was like one of those things where it's like, it's so, it's so impactful to read story narrative from those perspectives versus just, information, right? When you're reading about a young trans character, you're reading about, this Asian American Southern California experience, like the story is a huge, it's just really, as all of us are talking about these different stories coming from different perspectives, tons of the books that I've been reading this year are from a perspective that I just don't have and haven't had. And it is really eye-opening in a very different way from somebody who just purely read nonfiction. And I guess I watched films, but like getting to read stories from these perspectives has really made an impact on me just this over this year.
Hell yeah.
And I really recommend that book,
awesome.
Light from Uncommon Stars. It was a little there's a lot of different elements to it. It's like sci-fi and kind of like what's the Neil Gaiman? And I think we've canceled Neil Gaiman, but
I think he canceled himself.
Yeah, there we go.
By doing what he did and then suing the person.
It's a good way of saying that.
I didn't know he sued that person. No, I didn't know that
exited.
part.
Yeah, I sued him for like $500,000.
But it's like,
he was one of, he impacted, his work impacted me a lot, so it was very upsetting to learn.
Yeah, that's.
But continue your point.
This book kind of like connects like a sci-fi storyline and like a Good Omens-y type of like storyline, so it's a kind of a fun, like you have to be willing to kind of like get a lot of genres blended together, which I love. Some people are like, oh, I just want to read a sci-fi book, and if that's you, this is going to be like a lot of different genres pushed together, but that's like my sweet spot.
Yeah, I appreciate your point about learning about other cultures, because going back to Sarah, I was with her. There was like a podcast that we were on, and they decided to have like a live book club hang, and so everyone read the book, and then they brought Sarah in to talk about it. And there are these two Asian girls who brought their white boyfriends, who I guess read it, and they were very proud to say they didn't like the book, with Sarah sitting right there at the table, because they couldn't relate to it. Yeah, I just couldn't get into it because, I'm not an Asian girl, and I kind of went off on them. They had to edit it out of the podcast because I'm like, you don't read a book just to see yourself reflected back at you. You read a book. Like, I read Old Yeller. I'm not a white guy with a dog and living on a farm. Like, but I love that book, and you don't need to be the person in the book to relate. And I'm speaking to the choir here. Obviously, it's like duh. And so, but hearing Cortland say that so eloquently, it was like, yeah, because we read about Dune, and we read about science fiction and fantasy because we want to like put ourselves in places that are not familiar with us, so we can go on that journey, to go on that walk, to experience this story and these sequences of events that end up really inspiring us. And so, hell yeah.
Yeah, just even from the teaching, like a lot, because I from the classroom, but also I work on literacy programs for the company that I work with. And we often talk about Rudine Sims Bishop, and I don't know if you're familiar with her, but just her whole model of, or her whole thing about windows and mirrors in literature, and having those windows into other perspectives, and those mirrors to reflect your own.
Sure.
It is so interesting, because I think there's this stigma that we all know this, right? That men think that books written by men are books for everyone, and then books for women are for women, and books by trans folks are for trans folks. And it's I have gained so much knowledge by reading diverse perspectives and knowing more. I read recently a memoir of a trans female athlete that was on track to become an Olympian, and she talked about kind of that, just the struggle of what's happening with trans athletes in the Olympics, and I learned so much as a runner. It's talked about in the running community, because it is an issue that people are don't know a lot about and have a lot of assumptions and misconceptions about. And just reading her story, I'm and she's also a Black woman, and just from Jamaica, and just reading her story, I'm I learned so much just in her own memoir, and I that I never would have learned anywhere else, just from her lived experience. And I just wish people would embrace that more.
Yeah.
Especially cis white men.
Yeah.
Especially men.
Well, and
for sure.
I think that there's a sci-fi element to this too that Meg and I have talked about, and I think you've talked about on Identity Crisis, of in reading Becky Chambers, reading through the Wayfarer series and the Galactic Commons, and all the different species of sentient life that's in the Galactic Commons, in that book. There's a whole book. One of the whole books has no humans in it at all. It's just beings from other planets and other cultures. And I think Star Trek has been subverting cultural conversations through that method for a long time. But it was super cool to see Becky Chambers through that whole series really subvert a lot of assumptions that we have about gender and orientation and family structure and parenting. There's a whole group of beings that have the Shan, which is a part of their culture, their society, that switches genders depending on time. So they have kind of three genders, and the Shan are seen as this very honored gender in their culture and their society. And I don't know, just being able to see it through a strip all the human pretense and all the baggage that we have around what it looks like, and get to imagine it through a sci-fi lens, can sometimes be really subversive and help us.
I would say that about N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy, if anybody's read that.
That's on my list. I haven't read that yet.
It's so good. Yeah.
That's definitely there. Yeah.
And it addresses racism in a very profound way. And also, I would say that about T.J. Klune's books, in his book House in the Cerulean Sea, it talks about marginalization of queer folks, and like in a way that brings in elements of fantasy and things like that it's like not so straightforward, but it's subversive, like you're saying, Cortland.
Yeah, that's why to me, like, sci-fi and speculative fiction are such powerful genres, like, because it doesn't have to be a sci-fi plot or a sci-fi world to inhabit another person's perspective for a little while. It can be like any sort of slice of life type novel. But someone else's life is going to be drastically different than your own. People that, like, I think part of, there's this concern about empathy, and not to get like into our other realm of things as far as like how various religions discourage empathy. Like it's things like reading and
I think it's just one religion.
One faction of one religion.
Are there podcasts about that? No, I'm just...
Yeah, are there any podcasts that... which ones are at the top of those podcast lists, though? Anyways...
there's going to be like 20 books in our show notes for this episode, so
yeah, they're really
pretty epic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's
great.
Great. This is great. The other, so in a different vein than the Monk and Robot books, which are just sort of these very peaceful contemplative books. There's a series that I honestly think deserves to be more popular called the Terra Ignota series, and it's by Ada Palmer. It's 4 books. The plot is really hard to summarize, but the world, it's like the 2400s, 2500s, but the makeup of the world is that basically in the middle of the 21st century, these sort of fundamentalist wars and wars between countries got so intense that someone basically convinced everyone in the entire world to revoke their citizenship to their nation states. And the other thing that complicated things was that essentially like hypersonic Ubers were created. So like borders barely mattered, because you could get an Uber and like skip continents. And then after after everybody revokes their nationalities, people start grouping together in different ways. And the other thing that they outlawed, because religion was such a thing, they actually everyone agrees that you can have your own personal practice, but no group religion anymore. Also, everybody's they them. Everybody's they them. And then like when you take out gender and religion, but allow people to have their own like personal practices, then that's like the starting recipe. And then essentially the book happens like there's been like 300 years where, because everyone's lives are so interconnected, there's not been any wars. Because like what would happen in a world where you can be anywhere in like 20 minutes? How could you even? So anyways, but then things get more complicated, and like religion and gender start to reassert themselves, things like that. And that's sort of what drives the plot. But it's a fascinating world, because of those same sort of things, because it allows you to see a different perspective and also to just imagine very different circumstances. But to your point, Scott, like so much of what we do when we read is search for those things, and whether it's our interior life or trying to understand the interior life of someone else, that's the good shit.
The good shit. That could have been the title of this podcast.
I like the title of your podcast.
The good
Don't
shit.
change it.
Okay. We're committed to that. Yeah, we're fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Be a subtitle.
Yeah.
in.
The good shit.
Oh man.
Wow. I feel like we went on a ride for the last 45 minutes. That was pretty epic.
Yeah.
And I'm adding that
great.
series to my list. I'm really excited about it. I mean, that sounds like very much right up my alley. So I'm surprised I haven't heard about it at all, to your point about it not being as popular.
Yeah.
Not to add to your show notes, but when you started talking about like a series that you thought was underappreciated, I actually thought you were going to bring up Murderbot, which is now becoming a show on Apple TV. Like, so I was like, oh, but now.
No. Yeah. Like that's also I've listened to a couple of the novellas, but I am so excited for that show, and like the casting could not be more perfect. Like,
I haven't even seen the casting.
The trailer's out. Like it's coming soon.
I'm behind them on that.
Why am I blanking? He's one of the Skarsgårds. What's his name?
I'm
Alexander.
Yeah,
Alexander.
I love this.
From True Blood. He's the Murderbot. Which
that's
like
awesome.
Like if you've watched True Blood or some of the other things that he's in, and then like David Dastalmakian's in it, which I love him as a character actor. It's gonna be great. I'm excited.
It's coming out very soon. Like I don't know when you're airing this episode, but it's like 2 weeks from now. That's awesome. Okay.
So it's probably out.
Yeah. It's out.
So
look to the future.
Murderbot too.
Out
Murderbot
now.
is awesome. Is a lot of fun. So
yeah, that's a great place to end. This ended up being a very thematic episode that we didn't even plan for. So good job, everyone.
Hell yeah.
Let's do the obligatory plugs and everything. Where can people find both of you online? Where can they find Thereafter? Any other projects you want to plug?
You go first, Megan.
Yeah, I'll go. The podcast Thereafter, everywhere you can find podcasts. Identity Crisis, we don't have a lot of episodes out and we're not super consistent, but I am loving that project too. Like it just is so much fun and we do it when we can. And I think we've got 3 or 4 episodes out now and we're just kind of plugging away. And then I'm the Pursuing Life, probably Blue Sky and Threads, although I did kind of take a little break from socials. It was just so overwhelming. So, and that was one of my first times doing that and it was so nice. So, but I'm around. I check in there every couple days. So,
nice.
Yeah.
That's a good tempo. You don't have to live there anymore. You know,
exactly.
You can just check in, post there. Don't have to live there.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm back and forth about socials. So I'm Cortland Coffey, all of the places. I still have a thing on all the places. I'm very all or nothing. If you couldn't tell from me going from not having read a book since high school, really, like a fiction book, to reading 23 of them this year so far.
Whoa.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm like,
wow.
I'm and social media is kind of the same thing. So I took social media off for like January, February, and like the first part of March, and it was awesome. It's like a huge part of the reason I got all that reading done. But now I'm like back on 4 hours a day.
So. Yeah, we're back to thirst pics from Cortland. It's like it's a highlight of a lot of people's day.
Back to dopamining the internet with pictures of me and my ass. So you can find it on all the places until I go away again.
You keep posting how many books you read, and every time I feel this competition, because I've read 17, and now I'm like, I gotta get reading.
Challenge accepted.
Specifically, what it's for. I'm halfway through my 24th. If you want to, really be able to keep up.
Well, hey, if I can finish all the 10 books that I have going on right now, I'm gonna jump immediately to 27. So you'll be beat.
Oh, it's on.
So that's all the plugs.
I've read 4, so.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, I mean,
there you go.
Also, asterisk by mine is lots of them were very short novellas. I didn't read
No, it counts.
Yeah, but some people are like, oh my God, I've only read Dune. And I'm like, that's 9 of my books. Dune is it's like reading the New Testament.
Dune is somewhere around 700 pages, depending on what copy
version
you have. But it is, but yeah. And then and the funny thing was, I remember after having seeing the first movie and then reading the book, it's like, oh man, this is only like the first 300 pages.
Yeah.
This whole first book is like, or the whole first movie is only like 300 pages, but it was really interesting to see what they selected, what they changed. But anyways, that's First Sight Identity Crisis.
Yes. Yeah. I can't wait.
So awesome. Well, thank you both for coming on. Scott, as always, it's amazing to talk to
Mission
you
accomplished.
And to our guests.
We did this partly just to be able to hang out with people and talk about books, and so
yes,
it's like another excuse to like have a little hang and let people in on it. So very cool.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later.